The doorbell rang at exactly 8:17 a.m. on a Saturday morning, jolting me from my peaceful ritual of enjoying coffee while reading the news on my tablet. Nobody I knew would show up this early without calling first. I set my mug down with a frown and peered through the peephole to see two men in black uniforms standing on my porch, their posture rigid and official-looking. Security. "Open up, sir," the taller one called out, knocking again with more force. I didn't recognize either of them, and the uniforms they wore, black tactical pants and polo shirts with some kind of shield emblem, weren't from any legitimate security company I'd ever seen in Willow Creek Estates, my suburban neighborhood in Marietta, Georgia. "Who are you with?" I called through the door, not reaching for the lock. "Willow Creek HOA Security Division. We've received complaints about your property, sir. We need to conduct an inspection." I almost laughed. In the 3 years I'd lived here, our HOA had never had a security division. We had a property management company that handled violations, and occasionally Karen Matthews, our overzealous HOA president, would personally document infractions with her camera phone. But armed security guards? Never. "I don't think so," I replied. "I'm going to need to see some identification." The shorter guard stepped forward. "Sir, we're authorized by the HOA board to inspect all properties for compliance. If you refuse access, we'll have to issue a fine." Something felt very wrong. I stepped away from the door and grabbed my phone, quickly texting my neighbor Howard Foster. "Strange men claiming to be HOA security at my door. Does HOA have security now?" His response came back almost immediately: "No security. Call police." My instincts had been right. But before calling 911, I decided to handle this my way. I walked to my bedroom safe, dialed the combination, and retrieved my badge and service weapon. As a sheriff's deputy for Cobb County, I'd dealt with my share of scammers, but this was the first time they'd shown up at my doorstep impersonating officials. I returned to the door, where the knocking had become more insistent. "HOA security. Final warning before we enter the premises." I threw the door open, my badge held high in one hand. "Cobb County Sheriff's Department, I think you gentlemen might be at the wrong address." Their faces drained of color. The taller one immediately stepped backward, nearly tripping over a potted plant. There's been a misunderstanding." "I'd say so," I replied evenly. "Because our HOA doesn't have a security division, and impersonating officials is a serious offense in Georgia." Without another word, they scattered, bolting down my driveway toward a dark blue sedan parked across the street. I committed the license plate to memory as they sped away, tires screeching against the asphalt. My phone buzzed with another text from Howard. "Everything okay?" They ran when I showed my badge, getting dressed to file a report. Little did I know that this strange encounter would be just the beginning of a neighborhood nightmare that would expose corruption, criminal activity, and the dangerous overreach of power in our seemingly peaceful suburban community. After the fake security guards fled, I called the non-emergency police line to report the incident. I knew most of the patrol officers in this area, and within 20 minutes, Officer Tanya Rodriguez was sitting in my living room taking notes. So they specifically claimed to be with the HOA. She asked, her pen hovering over her notepad. Yes, that's what was strange about it. They weren't claiming to be police or federal agents. They specifically said they were HOA security doing property inspections. I handed her my coffee mug. That's why I was suspicious. "Our HOA is aggressive about rules, but they've never had armed security." Tanya nodded. "We've had reports of home invasions using similar tactics in Roswell and Alpharetta. Perpetrators pose as officials to gain entry, then rob the homes or worse. You did the right thing by not letting them in." I gave her the license plate number and the best description I could of both men. After she left, I decided to pay a visit to our illustrious HOA president, Karen Matthews. If someone was using our HOA's name for criminal activity, she needed to know. Karen's house was the epitome of HOA-approved perfection. Manicured lawn, symmetrical shrubs, and seasonal decorations that changed precisely on the first day of each new season. I rang the doorbell and waited, rehearsing how I'd explain the situation without sounding accusatory. The door swung open to reveal Karen in her weekend-attire designer athleisure wear and a full face of makeup at 10 a.m. on a Saturday. Her highlighted blonde bob didn't move an inch as she tilted her head in confusion. "Henry, is something wrong? Don't tell me your hydrangeas died again." Her forced smile didn't reach her eyes. "No, Karen, my landscaping is fine," I replied, trying to keep my tone friendly. "I wanted to talk to you about something concerning that happened this morning. May I come in?" She hesitated before stepping aside. "I suppose, but I have the neighborhood watch meeting at 11, so I can't be long." I followed her into an immaculate living room that looked more like a furniture showroom than a lived-in space. "Two men came to my door this morning claiming to be HOA Security Division officers," I explained. "They demanded to inspect my property and threatened fines if I refused." Instead of surprise, Karen's expression shifted to something resembling annoyance. And we don't have an HOA Security Division," I continued. "I'm concerned someone is using the HOA's authority to try to gain access to homes. I've already filed a police report, but I thought you should know so you can warn the neighborhood." Karen smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her pants. "Actually, Henry, we do have security now. The board voted on it last month. You would know this if you attended the meetings instead of sending excuses about your work schedule." This caught me off guard. "Security? Armed men in tactical gear doing home inspections. That wasn't in any email or newsletter." "It was in the minutes," she replied curtly. "Enhanced Community Protection Services. We hired them to help enforce compliance and improve neighborhood safety. Some homeowners have been resistant to following the guidelines. The board felt stronger measures were necessary." I stared at her in disbelief. "Karen, those men tried to force their way into my home without prior notice. That's not legal, even if they are legitimately contracted by the HOA." She sighed as if dealing with a difficult child. "They're just doing their job." "If you have nothing to hide, why not let them inspect? We've had reports about your property." "Reports? About what exactly?" "Improper storage of trash cans. Non-approved window treatments visible from the street. And there's the matter of your truck being parked in the driveway instead of the garage." I took a deep breath. "Karen, I'm a sheriff's deputy. I sometimes need quick access to my vehicle. And as for the other things, those are minor violations at best that don't warrant armed men showing up unannounced." "Well, we take our community standards seriously," she sniffed. "Enhanced Community Protection has full board approval to conduct inspections. If you interfere again, there will be consequences." Something wasn't adding up. Even in the most stringent HOAs, this level of enforcement was extreme and potentially illegal. "I'd like to see the contract with this security company," I said, "and the board minutes authorizing their services." "That information is only available to board members," she replied, standing up. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to prepare for my meeting." She practically pushed me toward the door. As I stepped outside, I noticed a dark blue sedan slowly cruising down the street, the same one from earlier. The driver made eye contact with me before quickly accelerating away. I pulled out my phone and called Howard. "Hey, it's Henry. We need to talk about the HOA. Something strange is happening, and I think it might be serious." Over the next few days, I started investigating both our HOA board and this mysterious Enhanced Community Protection Services company. Howard agreed to help, as did a few other neighbors who'd had similar encounters with the security team. I learned that the security company had only been formed 6 months ago and had no other clients besides our HOA. Their business address turned out to be a P.O. box at a UPS store. Most concerning, none of the guards appeared to have proper licensing or training as required by Georgia law for security professionals. On Wednesday evening, I attended a hastily organized meeting at Howard's house with 5 other homeowners who shared my concerns. They came to my house when my husband was on a business trip, said Felicity Morgan, a young mother who lived at the end of our street. They insisted they needed to inspect our backyard for a reported violation. When I refused, they said they'd return with authorization papers. I was terrified. Same here, said George Hernandez, a retired Army veteran. Except when I challenged them and asked for identification, they got aggressive. One of them put his hand on what looked like a gun holster. Howard paced his living room. I've been on the board before Karen took over. There was never any discussion about armed security. The most we ever did was hire a kid to take photos of violations twice a month. Something's not right, I agreed. Karen claims this was all board approved, but I've reviewed our HOA bylaws. They can't authorize warrantless searches of private property, regardless of what powers they think they have. So what do we do? Asked Diane Wilkins, our neighborhood's longest resident. Karen has turned this place into her personal fiefdom. People are afraid to speak up. I thought for a moment. We need evidence. Documentation of what's happening, proof of any financial irregularities, and testimonies from everyone who's had run-ins with these guards. Then we go to the authorities. The annual HOA meeting is next week, Howard noted. We could force a vote of no confidence in the current board. First, let's gather more information, I suggested. I'll see what I can find about this security company through my law enforcement contacts. As the meeting wrapped up, Howard walked me to the door. Be careful, Henry. Karen's always been power-hungry, but this feels different, more dangerous. I nodded. Lock your doors and don't let anyone in without proper identification. I'm going to get to the bottom of this. Next day at work, I ran the license plate from the security vehicle through our system. The car was registered to a man named Victor Mercer, who had a record 3 arrests for fraud and 1 for armed robbery, though the latter charge had been dropped. This was definitely not someone who should be running a legitimate security company. I was about to dig deeper when my sergeant called me into his office. Fitzgerald, got a minute? Sergeant Mitchell looked concerned as I entered. What's up, Sarge? He closed the door behind me. I got a call from the city council member for your district. Says you've been harassing the HOA leadership and interfering with their security contractors. Want to tell me what that's about? I was stunned. That's completely false. If anything, they're the ones harassing homeowners. I've been investigating some potentially illegal activity. I explained the situation, the unregistered security company, their intimidation tactics, and Karen's suspicious behavior. Sergeant Mitchell listened carefully. This sounds like a civil matter, Henry. HOA disputes aren't police business unless laws are being broken. That's just it. I think laws are being broken. These guards aren't licensed, they're impersonating officials, and they're attempting to enter homes without legal authority. He sighed. Look, you know how it is with these suburban power struggles. Document everything, but don't use department resources unless you find clear evidence of criminal activity. And for God's sake, don't flash your badge in personal disputes. I only showed my badge because I thought they were trying to break in, I defended myself. Just be careful. These HOA types have friends in local government. Don't make this a bigger issue than it needs to be. I left his office frustrated but even more determined. If Karen had enough influence to reach my sergeant, what other connections might she have? That evening, I decided to do some reconnaissance. I parked my personal vehicle, not my truck that Karen had complained about, a few blocks from the clubhouse where the HOA board held their meetings. According to the newsletter, they were having a closed executive session tonight. I positioned myself near a window where I could observe without being obvious. Inside, Karen sat at the head of a conference table with 4 other board members. To my surprise, one of the security guards from my doorstep was there too, along with a well-dressed man I didn't recognize. They appeared to be having a heated discussion. Karen repeatedly pointed at documents while the well-dressed man shook his head. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but their body language suggested disagreement. After about 20 minutes, they seemed to reach some kind of resolution. The board members signed several papers, which the well-dressed man collected before shaking hands with everyone and leaving. I ducked out of sight as he exited the clubhouse, then followed at a distance as he walked to a luxury SUV in the parking lot. Using my phone, I discreetly photographed him and his vehicle's license plate. When I returned home, I ran the plate through a public records database I had access to through work. The SUV belonged to a law firm Westbrook, Danson, and Mayer, specializing in real estate development and municipal contracts. I was so focused on my research that I almost missed the sound of something hitting my front window. I cautiously approached and peeked through the blinds to see a dark figure retreating across my lawn toward a vehicle idling at the curb. I rushed outside just in time to see the same blue sedan speeding away. On my front door was a notice printed on HOA letterhead, "Final warning. Compliance inspection scheduled for tomorrow, 9 a.m. Refusal to grant access will result in maximum penalties and potential legal action, by order of the board." This had gone far enough. I called Officer Rodriguez directly. "Tanya, it's Henry Fitzgerald. Remember those fake HOA security guys? They're escalating. I need some official backup tomorrow morning." "What's happening?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. I explained everything: the intimidation tactics, the suspicious security company, the threatening notice. "I'll be there at 8:45, she promised. "Don't engage with them before I arrive." The next morning, I was ready. I had my cell phone set to record video, copies of the HOA bylaws that clearly prohibited forced entry to properties, and my badge and service weapons secured but accessible if needed. At 8:43, Officer Rodriguez's patrol car pulled up in front of my house. She was in full uniform, which I hoped would deter whatever these security people had planned. "Thanks for coming," I said as she approached my door. "No problem. This sounds like a potential public safety issue if these guys are going around intimidating residents." She glanced at the notice still taped to my door. "That's pretty aggressive language for an HOA." At precisely 9 a.m., 2 vehicles arrived: the now familiar blue sedan and a black SUV with tinted windows. 4 men in the same tactical style uniforms emerged, along with Karen Matthews herself, clutching a leather portfolio and wearing an expression of righteous indignation. The group faltered momentarily at the sight of the patrol car before recovering their composure and approaching my door. I opened it before they could knock, with Officer Rodriguez standing visibly behind me. "Good morning," I said calmly. "How can I help you?" Karen stepped forward. "We're here for the scheduled compliance inspection." "I see you've called the police," which was completely unnecessary and a waste of taxpayer resources. "Actually, madam," Officer Rodriguez interjected, "I'm here because there have been reports of individuals impersonating officials to gain access to homes in the area." "May I see identification from everyone present?" The security guards exchanged nervous glances. Karen's face flushed red. "This is HOA business," she insisted. "We don't need police involvement." "I understand," Rodriguez replied professionally. "However, I still need to see identification from everyone, especially those presenting themselves as security personnel." One by one, the men produced IDs. I recognized the 2 who had first come to my door: Victor Mercer and someone named Ray Dalton. Both had criminal records, as I discovered. The others were James Wilson and Todd Brandt. "Are you all licensed security professionals as required by Georgia Code Section 4338? Rodriguez asked. Silence. Then Karen interjected. "They're contracted through a legitimate company. Their licensing is handled through their employer." "Which company is that?" I asked innocently. "Enhanced Community Protection Services," Karen snapped. "As you well know." "Interesting," I replied, "because I checked with the Secretary of State's office yesterday." That company wasn't properly registered until 3 months ago, and none of these individuals appear on the state registry of licensed security professionals. Karen's eyes narrowed. You've been investigating me. Not you, Karen. Just trying to understand why armed men are demanding entry to my home. Officer Rodriguez held up a hand. Let's keep this civil. Sir, do you consent to these individuals entering your property for an inspection? I do not, I stated firmly. And according to our HOA bylaws, Section 7.3, property inspections must be conducted with 72 hours written notice, during business hours, and only by the property management company representatives or board members themselves, not third-party contractors. I handed Rodriguez my copy of the bylaws with the relevant section highlighted. Karen sputtered. Those bylaws are outdated. The board voted on new enforcement procedures. Any changes to the bylaws require a 2/3 vote of all homeowners, I countered. No such vote has occurred. Victor Mercer stepped forward menacingly. Listen, we can do this the easy way or what, sir? Rodriguez cut in, her hand moving subtly toward her service weapon. Are you threatening a homeowner in my presence? Mercer backed down immediately. No, madam, just saying there could be fines. Karen, I said calmly, I think it's time you explained what's really going on here. Why are you so desperate to get inside my home and others in the neighborhood? She clutched her portfolio tighter. This is just about compliance, nothing more. Then why hire men with criminal records instead of using the regular property management company? Why the aggressive tactics? The other security guards looked at Mercer with surprise. Clearly, they hadn't known about his background. Karen's composure cracked. This meeting is over. You'll be receiving notice of fines and potential legal action. As they turned to leave, Officer Rodriguez said, Miss Matthews, I'm going to need you and Mr. Mercer to stay for a few more questions. The rest of you can go, but don't leave town. We may need to speak with you as well. The confrontation at my doorstep marked a turning point. Over the next week, Howard and I organized a massive information-gathering effort. We went door to door, collecting testimonies from homeowners who'd had similar encounters with the security team. Many had been intimidated into allowing inspections, and several reported that the guards had spent unusual amounts of time examining walls, taking measurements, and even looking into crawl spaces. Deanne Wilkins, our neighborhood historian, uncovered something particularly interesting in the county records. The entire Willow Creek subdivision is sitting on land that was rezoned from industrial to residential 20 years ago. There used to be a small manufacturing plant here in the 1980s. What kind of manufacturing? I asked. Electronics, mostly. But the company went bankrupt after environmental violations were discovered. The land was supposed to be remediate before development, but I'm not sure if that ever happened properly. This new information sent me down a different investigative path. I contacted the Environmental Protection Division of the Georgia Department of Natural Resources and requested historical records for our area. Meanwhile, the annual HOA meeting was approaching. Karen and the board tried to postpone it, citing security concerns. But the bylaws were clear the meeting had to occur on the scheduled date. 3 days before the meeting, I received a call from a state environmental inspector named Marcus Jenkins. Deputy Fitzgerald. I reviewed those historical records you requested. There's something you should know about the Willow Creek development. We arranged to meet that afternoon at a coffee shop well away from the neighborhood. Jenkins brought a thick folder of documents. The company that originally owned that land was called Tritech Electronics, he explained. They manufactured circuit boards and electronic components from 1976 to 1988. During that time, they disposed of significant amounts of trichloroethylene TCE and other industrial solvents improperly. How improperly? They basically dumped them into the ground. When the environmental violations came to light, the company declared bankruptcy rather than pay for cleanup. The land was supposed to undergo extensive remediation before any residential development. He slid several documents across the table. According to these records, the remediation was certified as complete in 1999. Willow Creek Estates was developed starting in 2002. So the problem was fixed, I asked, feeling a mixture of relief and disappointment. Jenkins shook his head. That's what's odd. The remediation certification was signed off by a county inspector named Robert Matthews. The name hit me like a thunderbolt. Matthews, as in Karen Matthews? I can't confirm any relationship, but it's worth looking into. Here's where it gets concerning. Soil samples taken from adjacent properties in 2018 showed TCE levels that suggest the original remediation might not have been as thorough as certified. Are the levels dangerous? Not acutely toxic, but prolonged exposure through groundwater or soil vapor intrusion could potentially cause health issues over time. Cancer, liver problems, that sort of thing. I studied the documents. Why wasn't this followed up on? The 2018 samples were part of a broader watershed study, not specific to Willow Creek. The results were filed but never triggered a focused investigation. Jenkins lowered his voice. Frankly, these kinds of follow-ups often get deprioritized unless there's political pressure. Or unless someone with influence wants them buried, I suggested. I couldn't comment on that, he replied carefully. But if you're concerned, new testing could be ordered. It would just take the right people asking the right questions. I thanked him for the information and headed straight to Howard's house. Together with Diane and a few other trusted neighbors, we pored over the documents. Robert Matthews was Karen's father-in-law, Diane confirmed. He worked for the county until about 2010. Her husband, Philip Matthews, is a real estate developer. Howard whistled low. So her father-in-law signed off on possibly fraudulent environmental remediation, and then her husband's company developed the neighborhood. And now, I added, she's using aggressive tactics to get inside people's homes. What if they're looking for evidence of contamination, maybe checking for vapor intrusion systems or testing for TCE in crawl spaces? But why now, after all these years? Felicity asked. I showed them another document Jenkins had provided. The state is planning to update groundwater protection regulations next year. All properties with historical industrial use would require new comprehensive testing. If contamination is found, property values could plummet, and whoever signed off on the faulty remediation could face charges. So Karen and whoever else is involved need to find out how bad the problem is before regulators discover it, Howard reasoned. They're doing their own secret testing through this fake security company. And intimidating anyone who gets in their way, I added. The annual HOA meeting was set for 7 p.m. on Friday at the community clubhouse. Nearly every homeowner in Willow Creek Estates showed up an unprecedented turnout. The tension in the air was palpable as Karen and the board members took their seats at the front of the room. Karen tapped her microphone. Welcome to the annual Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association meeting. We have a full agenda tonight, so let's proceed efficiently. She attempted to rush through the standard reports, clearly hoping to minimize discussion, but Howard stood up during the first pause. Point of order, he called out. According to the bylaws, homeowners are entitled to add items to the agenda at the beginning of the annual meeting. Karen's smile tightened. We've already finalized the agenda, Mr. Foster. Actually, Deanne interjected, holding up a copy of the bylaws, Section 4.2 specifically allows for agenda additions with the support of 10 or more homeowners. Murmurs of agreement spread through the crowd. Karen looked to the HOA's attorney, the same well-dressed man I'd seen at the executive session, who reluctantly nodded. Fine, Karen snapped. What additional items would you like to discuss? Howard stood tall. We want to discuss the hiring of enhanced community protection services, the alleged changes to inspection protocols, and the board's failure to properly notify homeowners of these significant changes. And, I added, standing as well, We want to discuss the history of environmental testing on this property and any current testing being conducted without homeowners' knowledge or consent. The room erupted in confused questions. Karen's face drained of color. The attorney whispered something urgently in her ear. Those matters aren't appropriate for this forum," Karen stammered. "They involve ongoing legal considerations that are confidential." "Illegal activities aren't protected by confidentiality," I countered. "We have evidence that unlicensed individuals presenting themselves as security personnel have been attempting to enter homes under false pretenses. We believe they're conducting unauthorized environmental testing." The attorney grabbed the microphone. "These are serious and unfounded accusations that could constitute defamation. I advise the board to adjourn this meeting immediately." "You can't adjourn an annual meeting without a vote," Howard objected. "And we have another item to add, a vote of no confidence in the current board." Chaos erupted as homeowners began shouting questions and demands. I noticed Karen and 2 board members attempting to slip out a side door. I followed them into the hallway. "Running away won't solve this, Karen," I said. "We know about your father-in-law's fraudulent certification. We know about the TCE contamination, and we know you've been trying to assess the damage before state regulators find out." She whirled around, her composure completely gone. "You have no idea what you're talking about. Do you know what would happen if this gets out? Everyone's property values would collapse overnight. People would lose everything. People could get sick, Karen. They might already be sick and not know why. That's more important than property values." "It's not that simple," she hissed. "The levels are low, probably not even dangerous. We just needed to confirm before the new regulations take effect. By hiring criminals to break into people's homes, by threatening your neighbors, that's not how you handle community health concerns." The attorney appeared beside her. "Miss Matthews, say nothing further." "Deputy Fitzgerald, these allegations are completely unfounded." "Are they?" I pulled out my phone. "Because I have the environmental reports right here. And I have recorded testimonies from your security guards about what they were really looking for inside people's homes." This was a bluff. I hadn't actually gotten any guards to confess, but it worked. Karen's face crumpled. "It wasn't my idea," she said desperately. "Philip and his partners panicked when they heard about the regulatory changes. They said we just needed to check a few houses that no one would even notice." The attorney grabbed her arm. "Karen, stop talking immediately," but the dam had broken. "What was I supposed to do? If this got out, we'd be sued into oblivion. Philip's father is elderly, he could go to jail. We were just trying to protect our investment, everyone's investment." At that moment, Officer Rodriguez entered the hallway with 2 other officers. I'd invited her to attend the meeting as a precaution. "Is everything all right here?" she asked, eyeing the tense confrontation. The attorney tried to regain control. "This is a private HOA matter, officer. There's no need for police involvement." "Actually," I said, "Miss Matthews was just explaining how she authorized unlicensed individuals to enter homes under false pretenses to conduct secret environmental testing because her family might be liable for fraudulent certification of toxic waste remediation." Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "Is that right, madam?" Karen looked from the attorney to me to the officers, then seemed to deflate. "I want a lawyer." "A different lawyer," she added, glaring at the man beside her. The aftermath unfolded rapidly. The State Environmental Protection Division launched a full investigation into the original remediation certification. Comprehensive testing throughout the neighborhood revealed TCE contamination in the soil and groundwater beneath several homes, though thankfully at levels below immediate health concern thresholds. A proper remediation plan was developed and implemented at the expense of the original developers, including Philip Matthews' company. Karen and 2 board members were charged with multiple offenses, including conspiracy to commit fraud, hiring unlicensed security personnel, and trespassing. Victor Mercer and his security team faced charges for impersonating officials and attempted breaking and entering. Robert Matthews, Karen's father-in-law, was investigated for falsifying environmental remediation records, though his advanced age and declining health complicated the prosecution. He eventually entered a plea agreement that required financial restitution but no jail time. As for our HOA, a complete restructuring took place. Howard was elected as the new president, with a commitment to transparency and reasonable enforcement of community standards. The security cameras that had been installed throughout the neighborhood without homeowner knowledge were removed, and the regular property management company resumed handling legitimate violations. 6 months after that confrontation at the HOA meeting, I sat on my front porch with Howard, watching as workers finished installing the final vapor mitigation system in a home across the street. These systems would prevent any potential TCE vapors from entering homes while the long-term groundwater remediation continued. Hard to believe all this started with those fake security guards showing up at your door, Howard remarked, sipping his beer. I'm just glad no one was hurt, I replied. It could have gone much worse if they'd tried to enter someone else's home without a badge and training. The irony is that if Karen and her cronies had just been honest about the environmental concerns from the beginning, the community probably would have worked together to address them. Instead, they created this elaborate conspiracy that's landed half of them in legal trouble. I nodded. That's the thing about HOAs, they work best when they remember they're serving the community, not ruling it. Howard raised his bottle. To Willow Creek Estates, fewer power trips, more neighborhood barbecues. I clinked my bottle against his. And absolutely no fake security guards. As the sun set over our neighborhood, I felt a renewed appreciation for this community. We had faced a crisis together and emerged stronger, more united. The environmental remediation would take time, but at least now everything was above board with regular updates and complete transparency. The next morning, I removed the final warning notice that I'd kept taped to my door as a reminder of how quickly things could go wrong when power went unchecked. In its place, I hung a small sign that read, "No inspections without 72 hours written notice, HOA Bylaws Section 7.3. Just in case anyone needed reminding.